The Girl Who Lived, Part 2 of 2, a Harry Potter fanfiction written by E.Jade Lomax on Archive of Our Own as Dirge Without Music. "He's back," she said. She said it again and again, and no one believed her. When Dementors came to Little Winging that next summer, she conjured a Patronus, because she was scared, because Dudley was about to lose his soul, and even he did not deserve that. Because Harry had lived through enough to know that survival came before obedience, always. When they tried her before the Wizengamot, she had a feeling her chopped-off hair and her scowl did not help her case. They had told stories for years about the girl who lived, the innocence that had turned Voldemort's evil to dust and memory, but she stood there with hunched shoulders, unpretty and unfriendly. She did not look enough like the story they wanted to hear. But Dumbledore swept in, swept out, set her free, and didn't look at her once. It seemed like everyone else was looking at her those days. The crazy girl, the attention seeker, the compulsive liar. She fisted her hands in her robes and tried to keep her eyes on the back of Ron's robe, Hermione's stack of books, to listen to Neville wax rhapsodic about vegetation and not listen to the crowd murmur around them. When Zacharias Smith scoffed, in the Hog's Head, about Harry teaching defense against the dark arts, he flicked his eyes over her, the short black hair that wouldn't lie flat, the smudges on her glasses. "This girl," he said. "Excuse me," said Lavender. "Harry carries all the spiders out of our room by hand. Did you know that? Hey, Zachariah, do you know what your boggart turned into back in Lupin's defense against the dark arts class? Because I do." "Well," muttered Ron, "that's just 'cause spiders are bloody terrifying, that's what." "Harry gets them out of the boys' room too, if it's just Ron in there," Parvati added brightly. When Harry sat in Umbridge's detentions, writing "I must not tell lies" into the back of her hand, Umbridge brushed back her bangs and tutted about what a pity it was. Her hair would have looked so lovely long. "A bit exotic with those eyes," Umbridge said, and Harry scratched the sharp tip of the quill over parchment. McGonagall snarled at Umbridge in Harry's career review. "She has performed admirably on every Defense Against the Dark Arts exam set by a competent teacher." When Harry, Fred and George got suspended and kicked off the Quidditch team, Ginny stepped in as Seeker. "I thought you said it was lonely," Harry said. "Gets me on the team," she said, and shrugged. "And it doesn't have to be. Come practice with me." "Umbridge confiscated my broom," said Harry. "You think my brother's broom shed is the only place I can steal things from?" she said. "Come on, Harry." They twisted between low limbs and the sparse borders of the forbidden forest, out of sight of the castle. Harry sped past old oaks, got sharp leaves stuck to her robes, and remembered Pansy running scared in the dark their first year, remembered a dark shape looming over a fallen unicorn. Then she caught sight of Ginny's flash of red hair through the gloom, and took off in chase. Neville worked harder than any kid in the DA, just like she had with the dancing. Just like with the dancing, Lavender and Parvati took out their wands and put on some music and worked with her in the dorm room. They lost a few piles of unicorn figurines to reducto practice. Harry dreamed of a flash of green light, night after night. She dreamed of old Muggle men eavesdropping and dying. Harry dreamed she was a giant snake, killing Arthur Weasley, who had once asked her excitedly about elevators. When she woke from that, shaking, she told Hermione, who told first McGonagall, then Ron, then Ginny. They went to St. Mungo's, where Arthur was declared stable, but Harry couldn't wash the taste from her mouth, not even with Molly's best hot cocoa. That first dream had come true, so when she dreamed about Sirius, she believed it. They told everyone they could, but no one had ever listened, not since Harry had slammed down on the overgrown Quidditch pitch with a corpse in her arms, not since the first time she had tried to explain to an adult that she lived in a cupboard under some stairs. They went to the Department of Mysteries, Harry and Ron and Hermione, Parvati and Lavender, who had caught them arguing in the dorm room, and Neville and Ginny's weird friend Luna. They rode Thestrals, which Parvati could see, her grandfather, and Lavender could not. "Your rabbit doesn't count," Hermione said, and Parvati glared when Lavender's lower lip wobbled. It didn't go much different. It was a trap. The Death Eaters were waiting. The order came, not quite too late. When Sirius died, the last words he said to his goddaughter were not, "Good shot, James." He called her Lily. Bellatrix hit him with an Avada Kedavra, ripped gleefully from her throat. Harry watched Sirius fall backward through the veil and not come out the other side. All through the next summer, Harry read Wizarding newspapers whenever she could. She ignored the Dursleys except when she couldn't. When summer ended, Dumbledore dragged her before Slughorn, who looked at her and saw Lily, who looked at her and saw promise. Dumbledore dragged her many places that year. In the previous, she had barely gotten him to look at her. But Dumbledore pulled Harry into his office and told her about crueler things, shards of souls, power that corrupts. Harry listened to him talk about Horcruxes, about Hallows, about years and lives lost. The shape of the war spread out at her feet, stretching out, promising struggle. Romance hit the Hogwarts 6th year like a plague. It didn't go that much different, except that when Ron became Lavender's 1-1, Harry got to live through the icy chill of the girls' dormitory. Hermione tried to be angry at Ron, and not at Lavender so much, but it was hard not to be unhappy. Harry tried to take her out flying to lift her spirits. Maybe try a library, Ginny suggested. Buy her some books. Punch Ron. I don't think brooms are as much of Hermione's happy place as yours and mine. You punch Ron, said Harry. I like Ron. I might just. You never know, said Ginny. Avoiding Hermione's anger, Harry's discomfort, and Lavender's affection, it was Ron who noticed how very weird Draco was acting that year. He's just pacing, he reported irritably to Harry over breakfast. Hermione got lunches and evening with Harry. Ron got breakfast and dinner. Ginny thought this was all pretty dumb, and told Harry that regularly. Goes and, I don't know, takes naps in the room of requirement or something, but Malfoy's up to something. I just don't know what yet. In his cluttered old office, Harry listened to Dumbledore talk about Grindelwald. She listened to the regret in his voice, and she wondered. She and Ginny were still racing through the trees on stolen, borrowed brooms. It was a hard habit to shake. Harry followed Ginny's bright flash of hair through twisting, reaching branches, watched her rocket off, upward towards the sky. She thought sometimes about what it would be like if Ginny went someplace she couldn't follow. She thought about that now, as Dumbledore's voice brushed softly over the barest shapes of the Hallows, of a childhood he was ashamed of Grindelwald's life and fall and defeat. She thought about that, and she dreamed about the chamber floor, dark and wet and cold. She dreamed, and it was a memory. A small person crumpled on that cold floor, robes black, long hair red. When Dumbledore brought her along to the rock and the sea, she was not meant to save him. She had never been. Dumbledore had meant, all his life, all her life, for her to save everyone but him. And but for Tom, of course. Not all children can be saved. Harry watched the cold water. She helped Dumbledore drink the poison, even as he begged her not to, because he had asked her to. She took the locket with her. She saw Malfoy stand, trembling, unable to finish the job. She saw Severus do it for him. She saw Dumbledore fall. She did not cry, because she had trained herself out of that in a cupboard under the stairs. She screamed curses, because Cedric had died 10 inches to her right, a spare. Those broad shoulders and kind eyes, and that fair game. Nothing in this was fair. She screamed it. She hurled curses because Sirius had toppled back through the veil, the wrong name on his lips, because he had been living in the past, and she had looked up at him, and seen a future where she had a family who didn't hate her. She singed Snape's heels with her rage, trying to forget standing between Sirius and Lupin and Peter, age 13, and telling them to be better than their betrayers. Snape screamed that he wasn't a coward, and maybe he wasn't, but there were worse things to be. Harry did not go home. There was a war. It was her inheritance. Dumbledore had laid it out at her feet. 7 Horcruxes, waiting. 1 man, dying. 1 young woman to carry it on her shoulders. The girl who lived, come to die. But Dumbledore had not yet told her that part. They buried him. Harry left, and Ron and Hermione refused to let her go on alone. They found the true locket in the ministry, the cup in a deep Gringotts vault. Hermione trimmed Harry's hair in a gloomy forest, and then Ron's, and tied back her own. They ran and walked and hid. They fought and slept. Harry and Hermione danced in the tent like they had once twirled around the dorm room to Lavender's enchanted music. Ron listened to Lee Jordan's radio, the lists of names, hoping not to recognize any. The months ticked by, long and tiring, and then they went back home. We had a sister, Aberforth Dumbledore said, as he led them through the passage back to the castle. Harry pushed her bangs out of her eyes. Ariana, said Aberforth. She was lovely. I bet every time my brother looked at you, he felt guilty. When Harry stepped back onto Hogwarts Stone, she was older. She had never looked her age. She had buried Dobby on a peaceful beach. She had heard Hermione scream on the marble floor of Malfoy Manor. She had set a dragon free, fallen into cold water, lost Ron and got him back. She had stood at the graves of parents she would never get to know. They crawled out the end of the passage and found the ranks of the DA spread out around them, Parvati and Lavender leaning against each other's shoulders and grinning at the sight of them. Dennis Creevey peeking out from around his brother Colin's side. Hannah Abbott with a bruise on her cheek, talking gently to a first year with a green-trimmed robe. Nevi, newly tall and her face terribly still. Ginny had her hair pulled up in a messy tail, her sleeves rolled up to her elbows, while she hauled boxes of pumpkin pasties, Weasley Wheezes, and other material of war around. Harry had a host of Horcruxes found and broken. She had days of travel in the soles of her feet, cold nights in quiet forests, and heavy stretches of rocky ground. Ginny had a host of children at her back, armed and scared and powerful. She had her hair like a war banner, and dirt smudged between her freckles. Harry's hands felt empty in ways they hadn't for ages, weighed down with old swords and whispering lockets, a war inherited. She strode across the floor, her hair falling in her eyes, her heart thudding under her breastbone. Ginny looked up, and neither of them had ever looked their age, not the kid from under the stairs, not the first year paling and paling in her hand-me-down black robes. When the Dementors came, they both went down faster than anybody, and they had both learned how to make their own Patronuses, to walk through that deathless cold anyway. There were 3 scrapes, almost claw marks, on Ginny's arm, and a bruise on her chin. Harry had her own new wounds. They would tell each other the stories of them later, but for now, Harry brushed her fingers along Ginny's jawline, leaned in, and kissed her in the middle of that crowded floor. Lavender wolf whistled. Ginny curled her fingers in the short hair at the back of Harry's skull. The halls of Hogwarts had been at war, quietly, for months, the same way the backwoods and the Ministry and Diagon Alley had been, but the girl who lived had come back to Hogwarts to find the last piece of Tom Riddle's ugly soul, and Tom knew. It did not go that different. Colin Creevey caught a spell in his ribs. He fell and did not get up. Teeth bit into Lavender's skin, and she went down on cold Hogwarts flagstone. Fred Weasley died not telling a joke, but laughing at one. Percy watched his brother's face go slack. Percy killed the man who killed him. Percy carried Fred's body to the Great Hall and laid it out with the others. It did not go that different. They found the diadem and destroyed it. Voldemort gave his ultimatum. Harry walked out to the forest. Her hands were cold in the brisk breeze. Trees tossed ahead, and sticks cracked below, and she walked out to the forest, turning the stone over and over in her hand. She had found dead unicorns and families of spiders and caged dragons in this forest. A ford ran wild somewhere in this underbrush. She had been scared and lost and hidden here, in this wilderness on the edge of the safest place she knew, which wasn't safe at all. She had spent stolen moments flying with Ginny here, cold hands wrapped tight around stolen brooms. Stolen moments. They were all stolen. You had to give them back eventually. Harry had grown up with holes in her life, and she knew better than most. Molly Weasley's welcome had felt like a gift every time, every holiday, every Christmas, every too-smothering hug. Being let into the warmth of that kitchen had never been something she expected to be able to keep forever. You don't get forevers. No one does, not even Tom Riddle, no matter how special he told himself he was. You could only run so long, wind in your teeth, hands clamped around the time you had taken and not been given. Harry turned the stone in her hand over 3 times and wished for her ghosts. They had her eyes, her hair, her love. They stood translucent around her, the shifting darkness of the forest visible through them. Harry wrapped her cold hands in her robes, because she couldn't bear the idea of reaching for them and finding nothing there to touch. "My baby girl," said James, and Harry was almost his height now, almost his age, almost to her own death. "Harry," said Lily, Remus and Sirius, standing by her, were so many exhausting years her senior. Lily was so young, 20, a mother, a widow for a few bare minutes before she had gone too. Harry, we're so proud of you. I'm scared, Mum, she said. Harry had trained herself out of crying in a cupboard under the stairs. James and Lily were too young. Sirius's gaunt cheeks, Remus's scars, even now, even resting in peace, were too old. Was Remus's body even cold yet, up in the great hall, laid out under the starry ceiling? Harry remembered Hermione whispering about Hogwarts, a history, age 11, friendless, eyes wide. Harry had called for her dead, and they had come. Lavender was laid out up there too, and here she was, standing translucent on the cold dirt. Her fingers were bright, even now, with the sparkling purple nail polish she had always stunk up their room with. She was too young. She was almost Lily's age. Hey, said Lavender, punch some Death Eaters for me, okay? And tell Parvati sorry. Harry couldn't speak. Remus stepped forward and put a hand on her shoulder that she couldn't feel. It was meant to be comforting. Harry squeezed her eyes shut. You've been so brave, said Remus. You just need to hold on for a little while longer. We love you, said James. You too, she whispered. When she opened her eyes, they were gone. It didn't go that different. Harry did not even draw her wand. Given a chance to get on a train and not look back, she looked back. Narcissa cared more for her son's life than her husband's cause. Hagrid carried Harry's body back to Hogwarts, the same way he had carried her as a baby, out of the ruins of Godric's Hollow. There would be people who called her blessed for years to come, for generations. There would be people who called her beautiful, or loving, or good. But when Harry rose dirty from that Hogwarts stone, the people there didn't call her anything but alive. They raised their wands, teachers and students, faculty and children fighting for things worth dying for. Nevi pulled the sword from the hat and cut through Nagini's serpentine spine. Harry had dreamed of green flashes all her life, of her mother's scream, her father's shout, the pain on her forehead. Voldemort didn't scream when he died. He went out with a whisper, then a thud. Harry blinked green out of her eyes. Her scar would not ache again for the rest of her life. After the war, Ginny tried out for Junior League Quidditch leagues, then semi-professional. When the Harpies hired her on as an alternate chaser, Harry took her out to lunch, and they toasted the 11-year-old girl who, before diaries and riddles and snakes, had stared up at her dark bedroom ceiling and told a famous stranger she was going to get on the house team. Harry went through Aura basic training with Parvati and a few of the other interested DA kids. Hermione declined, though the Auras tried to woo her for months. They should be relieved, actually, Harry told Hermione. You don't follow rules very well, despite your reputation. We broke you of that habit, first year, and it stuck. Like you follow orders, Hermione sniffed, and Harry grinned. It took 4 years of quiet correspondence and long hikes for Nevi to bring Hannah Abbott a bouquet of daisies. Nevi blushed bright red when Hannah kissed her thank you on the cheek and held her hand all the rest of that afternoon. Dennis Creevy went through all of his brother's photos, one by one, and published a book that laid out images of the war taken by a boy who hadn't made it through. Harry took flowers to her parents in Godric's Hollow, to Sirius's empty grave and Remus's full one. She went to see Tonks and Fred and Colin and Lavender. But she also went to Parvati, Hannah, and Nevi's little shared apartment, a few streets from Diagon Alley. They had mice on the walls and chipped paint on their door, but Nevi grew daisies and little cucumbers in a box on the windowsill, taking advantage of every speck of light. Molly Weasley had Harry for tea every week, with Andromeda Tonks and Harry's goddaughter Teddy Lupin, short for Theodora. Teddy turned her hair bubblegum pink when she wanted attention, and Ginny took her to the orchard out back, and taught her to fly on a little toy broom before she had even learned to run. Harry had rock cakes with Hagrid that she hid under napkins and threw away later. Luna took them out stargazing, and told them about constellations that no one else had ever heard of. Harry spent late nights with Ron and bottles of fire whiskey in the dim back rooms of George's joke shop. Sometimes Hermione and Ginny came, or George and Lee too, or whole populated gatherings of the DA. But sometimes it was just Harry and Ron, like that first day on the express, not needing to say much at all. She had morning coffee and quick lunch breaks with Pravati, both of them as bruised as they were ink-stained. Hermione blazed through their lunches now and then, between pestering politicians and giving soapbox speeches. They kept trying to give Harry bigger offices, but she haggled them down. In the evenings, Harry rolled her sleeves down and stepped through the flue. Professional Quidditch had about as late and as erratic a schedule as did aura work, so the little house was empty as often as it wasn't. She'd see signs of Ginny by the dishes left in the sink, or the little notes tucked into Harry's favourite chair. Mom sent more butterscotch. Please eat it. I don't know what to do. The girls refused to let me into the locker room with any more of it. It was a little house, but it was bigger than any home Harry had ever known. The windows were wobbly. The stove took a thump or two to start up. Luna had helped them paint every wall, before Ron and Hermione had helped them levitate all the furniture in, and each surface had ended up a slightly different shade of eggshell white, but Harry rather liked it just the same. Harry visited her living, and she visited her dead. She was one of the living, and she didn't forget that, except on the very worst days. In a cupboard under some stairs, she had taught herself how not to cry. In this home of her very own, she remembered how. She learned to laugh when she burned bacon in the kitchen, with Ginny's arms wrapped around her waist and Ginny's chin tucked over her shoulder, freckly nose wrinkling. Harry invited people over. Chess with Ron, book clubs with Hermione and Pravati, weirdly themed dinners with Luna, and she locked the door after, not locking herself in, but locking everything else out. On full moon nights, when Harry was remembering being 13 and dreaming of Sirius stealing her away, Ginny squeezed her shoulder and took her out flying, wrapped in years of Weasley sweaters. On wet nights, when the chamber's chill damp was leaking into Ginny's bones, Harry got the brooms, and they went racing through the trees outside town. They came home soaked. Ginny made the cocoa and Harry made the blanket nest on the couch, and they would wake up there the next morning, tangled and warm. Some nights they didn't fly. Some nights Harry was tired or Ginny was sad, and so Ginny told stories of Fred's old pranks, and Harry talked about aura cases she wasn't supposed to talk about. They ate tomatoes from Nevy's personal plots in the herbology greenhouses. They sometimes read the books that Hermione lent them, but only sometimes. Harry burned their bacon, and she locked their doors. Ginny teased her for her messy hair, and kissed her on the worn carpet, among their unevenly painted walls. Harry felt like a thief some days, when she woke up to soft sunlight on a Sunday morning, and felt safe, felt at peace. Stolen moments on stolen brooms. But then Ginny would roll over, her hair a mess, her eyes heavy-lidded with sleep, and she would smile to see Harry there in the morning light. They would get up together. The world would be slow, and the kitchen tile would be cool under their bare feet. This has been a reading of a fan fiction creation by E.Jade Lomax, with music by Maiden.